Boom. Live and ready to cover football contest countdown show, Circa Millions and Survivor Week 3. Hopefully, we had a little bit more of a somber intro music than we did last week, and I think it sort of sets the table for Week 3 after 2 weeks of, well, disappointing consensus picks, to say the least. But I've got to be the reminder here, the sort of bearer of principle, saying that we are picking the consensus picks for the contest, which are released every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and not making picks for the contest. An important distinction that we've had to go back and forth on Twitter a couple times, but nevertheless, we have been off to a very rough start. We've got 2 right in 2 weeks, but still 80 games to go. LVC, how are we going to turn this around and get above the 60% mark that you quoted in the first episode of the season?
Well, I don't think you painted it as bad as it was. We actually had in our consensus last week, one of our top 5 was the opposite of what made the consensus. So we were really wrong on, I think it was the Carolina game.
Missed by a mile is a good way to put it. However, to our credit, we keep picking very lopsided games, 4-5 and then 4-5, where we're over 70% of the differential. So we're on the lopsided games. We just can't pick the popular lopsided games, which continues to sort of hamper us and be an issue, I think.
Yeah, and it's important to be on those lopsided games if you're going to be winning. So, if we're getting the 6, 7, 8 teams, that's not all that bad. There's usually not huge differences on these. Some of these are missing the top 5 by handfuls of picks. So it's not as bad as it appears on the surface. But what it really boils down to is, the record wasn't good for the people. So they're doing things wrong, and that's what's making us look wrong on these predictions.
Yeah, throw it all on the viewers and the listeners and those playing in the contest. Never mind us. We're just trying to do something else. With that said, before we came on air, you mentioned something about Survivor and how you handled it. Are you allowed to talk about that on air? And obviously a big contest player, don't want to give too much away, but can you get into that or tiptoe around what might have went wrong in week 2?
No, I'm willing to punish myself and humiliate myself. I didn't follow my
We're already doing it anyway, right?
Yeah, I'm doing it anyway. So it just, I did not follow my own advice, and I deserve to pay the price. I had the first week I picked a big underdog that won outright. The second week I had a team that was very close in the neighborhood of a small underdog, small favorite. And at the last minute, I wimped out and took Pittsburgh. And boy, I just deserve it. I would have been sitting in Fat City with clear skies ahead and open field with all the teams to choose from. And instead, I did one of those, I'm going to take the Pittsburgh. So
you weren't alone, though, because last week there was quite a bit of a divide in terms of the Survivor picks, multiple teams with a couple hundred selected. Pittsburgh was the 4th or 5th most selected. There were about 300 people with you that went the way of fading the Raiders. So it wasn't just yourself that was taking that opinion, was still a far cry from what the number 1 and number 2 most selected teams were in week 2.
Well, you know what it is, and it's just simple. I didn't play to win. I did not make that selection to win. When on my original team, I go, this is the perfect team to take, a lot of risk. But, boy, you're sitting in the driver's seat. It's early in the season. Go for it. And I don't know what it was, but, that little cancer grows in you sometimes when it's time to select. And last year I was really good at ignoring it, and I paid the price last week, and that's just the way it is. So,
Producer Brady was sharp enough here to pull up the week 2 selection count. So no surprise, I think, to either of us that the Browns, Packers, and Bucks were the 3 most selected teams of week 2. Those were all the double-digit favorites that were on the board. There you were at 4th with the Steelers, 252 other folks with you. Pats 6-point favorite, Broncos 6-point favorite, Seahawks 6-point favorite. So all of the big prices, not surprisingly, at the top of the board, almost in order from biggest to smallest, but you were right there at 4th with the Steelers at 252.
Yeah, and it's just dumb because, I look at it's just why do you want to use up your smart bomb so early in the season? It was just dumb. There was a better weeks to use Pittsburgh down the road also. But trying to get teams that you can't use again is the name of the game. So, people should be looking at Carolina tonight. When else are you going to use them?
Now, to your credit, that bringing up Carolina tonight, which is likely to be a popular pick, but you were saying before to all of the new first-time players or those playing at home that you want to the big favorites were a gift and you want to avoid those. So even though you may have gone against the team that you were initially thinking of that would have set you up for another week of success, you did avoid those big favorites, which is something that everybody listening to the show should do on a weekly basis, hoping for that big upset. Because like we saw right there, one of those double-digit favorites goes down, and there's a lot of people not playing this week too.
Well, and just look at Cleveland and Houston. That game tightened up at the end, and it looked like Manziel might not be back. What would have happened? And they weren't pressuring Mills the entire time. They only blitzed him one time, didn't they? So I don't know what was going on with Cleveland in their defense, but that game was tighter than it looked for a period of time, and that could have gone either way. But just a reminder, somebody in the pool took both sides of that game. You don't take both sides of a game.
It's thrown away $1,000.
But he did it 3 times, all 6 entries on that game. So I don't know what people are thinking, but if you have 2, you don't go heads up. You don't sacrifice. So just remember that.
So last week there was the Packers reference that got flip-flopped on your end, and we just got a Johnny Manziel reference on the Cleveland Browns instead of Baker Mayfield. And to be completely fair, I think we all kind of look at them as the same person, Les Mayfield from last year when Stefanski comes in and changes that team around. But for many years there, they were basically the same quarterback.
They do. And I think I called – I do this once a week. I called Herbert Hebert week 1, so –
You were to all the Quebec folks on covers.com from Canada listening, Hebert is not that far away from Herbert.
I know.
So it was a cultural reference, not a misguided one.
Well, I'm a Michigan Panthers fan, so he's the guy.
So looking ahead to week 3, we've kind of gone back and forth, but I think we'll take a bit different direction trying to pick the consensus here, because there's 2 teams, in my opinion, this is just me, that are absolutely going to be in the top 5. And I think looking at the numbers that we have right now, all of the contest numbers from Circa are down on the bottom ticker. There's 2 to me that are must-haves in the top 5 that I think we can get out of the way quickly. So can I throw them at you?
Absolutely.
I think number 1, without a doubt, has to be the Arizona Cardinals, -7.5 on the road. And even though that number is probably going to ultimately close at Cardinals -7, this is a game that I'll admit, I bet it at 7 -05 personally. I don't know if I'll play it in the contest, but I bet it very early. And I have seen every single podcast, every single media show, anything talking about betting on NFL week 3, referencing the Cardinals, Twitter accounts, accounts that I have views into. Like, there's tons of exposure here to the Cardinals, and I think that absolutely bleeds over into the contest. Is there any disagreement there that the Cardinals are one of the top 5 most picked against the Jags, who have injury concerns on the offensive line and within the secondary?
So you get the first pick in our head-to-head contest. Is that going to be your pick?
Maybe this is all a setup. We'll get to that at the end, but I will say that it's certainly one of the considerations. I'm down 2-0, by the way, in the head-to-head for the most picked team that we're going back and forth for that lucrative steak dinner at the end of the season. But I think Cardinals are certainly one of the 2 or 3 teams that are going to be most picked this week. Is there any disagreement on your side? Talk me out of it.
Well, what's your second team?
Second team I'm looking at has to be the Raiders. We already saw them most picked in week 1 in a much more difficult situation against the Baltimore Ravens, but now back at home. I think everybody's looking to them for home field advantage. And of course, Miami's without Tua. And so that number right now in the contest, wait for the ticker to come around, Raiders -4. There's still 4.5s available right now elsewhere in the market. Those will not be around for long, people are going to be betting the 4.5 today and this afternoon. We're going to see that number come back the other way because it's just disproportionately inflated to where it should be. But I think people are going to look at the Raiders at home against Jacoby Brissett, the Dolphins getting blown out last week against the Buffalo Bills, 35-0, whatever that final score was. Raiders winning at Pittsburgh, but coming off that week 1 night in Monday where they were most selected overall in the millions. I think we're going to see that continue again with them back at home.
Okay, so I'll bite on the Raiders. We'll make that one of the 5.
You're not biting on the Cardinals.
I said I'm biting on the Raiders.
Okay, so the Cardinals are fringe, but I may use the single season veto to get the Cardinals in the top 5 over what else we have. But I'll switch it over to you. So we're good with the Raiders. We'll lock that in -4 as one of the 5 consensus plays. Well, I think we've got 3 more, but you're saying we have 4 more. But where are we going for the next couple?
Well, you said you had a third one, so spit that one out too.
So if I had to look for a third team that absolutely stood out, and here's a big caveat. So we're doing this on Thursday, right? So we don't necessarily know what's coming. However, there's a number of quarterback injuries this week that we kind of have to be wary of because we're going to get practice reports in the next 1 to 2 hours for a lot of the East Coast teams on Thursday. And then obviously we get the final ruling this time tomorrow where we're going to know a lot about these quarterbacks. But Carson Wentz is playing on not 1, but 2 sprained ankles. And they're allegedly, this was the quote yesterday from practice, that they are throwing the kitchen sink at him for treatment purposes. But they've also got injuries on the defensive side. So we're looking at the Titans, a 5.5-point favorite right now, off of the upset win at Seattle, where everybody saw Derrick Henry do his thing, Julio Jones go wild, and everything that everyone loved about the Titans a year ago that they didn't see in week 1 showed up in week 2 in an afternoon game that a lot of folks were watching. And I think we have the potential to see this number from 5.5 get to 7 if Wentz is out, which it's not trending well for him, but it's another injured starting quarterback and a Colts team that can't stop the run to begin with. So I think we're going to look at this in a bit of a different light potentially come Friday or Saturday. But where we are right now, Thursday morning at 5.5, I just have a feeling that number might grow, especially if Wentz is out. So I think the Titans are going to be a popular home side here as well.
That's possible. Boy, I'd really like to see that line get up to 7. I know they're I forget the guy's name, but they've got 2 quarterbacks ready to go. Obviously, Eason made his appearance last week. And they've got one other guy who's played a handful of games a couple of years ago that's got experience that they might put on the roster. So I don't expect Wentz to go. Do you expect him to go?
It's not looking good at all. And he's a tough guy, and to see both of his legs potentially with issues, we know mobility is important. He hasn't gone anywhere near the practice field, and the walking boot's always a bit of a thing that gets overblown because it's usually viewed as much worse than it actually is. But he was on a boot and a scooter motoring around facilities yesterday, and so we're just waiting to see what happens. Producer Brady behind the scenes might have an update as we go here live as they're just getting into practice at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So maybe we'll catch something live in action here, but it sure seems like he's not going to go, and we've seen this line trend up just a little bit.
Yeah, I think they're going to have 2 quarterbacks to go, and I think that that's going to be hard for them to prepare for. They're a horrible defense anyway. I'd love to see that thing get up to 7. But I don't know. You know, the Colts played strong against the Rams, surprisingly. So and everybody knows the Titans defense is a sieve. You know, I didn't have that on my list, quite frankly.
Here's producer Brady working his magic. Brett Hundley took the majority of reps in practice, and he and Jacob Eason may both play against the Titans if there is out. Still hope he can play, but we'll know a little bit more as practice comes up here in the next 30 to 45 minutes. So no go on the Titans for you at 5.5 as a consensus.
Well, you know, I just I'm letting my bias kick in on that because I think it would be interesting I think it's going to be an interesting game. So no, it doesn't stick out to me. I see a handful of other games. One game that sticks out to me is there's 3 of them that stick out.
Fire away.
I think Pittsburgh on a flat 3 is going to be too tough for people to pass up. I think they're going to be all over that like a bad rash. I really do.
A bad rash.
It's assuming Ben's playing, and Watt's trending to play also. Last I heard, so with that in order, I see that that line bouncing back up. Also, didn't you mention it in your Simple Handicap podcast that you expect that line to go back up?
Well, so it all depends on Ben. The only reason this number has come down was because of the Roethlisberger pec injury. It opened 6.5. We're now at a flat 3. He apparently cannot reach. And so, to be quite honest, the way he throws the football nowadays, he doesn't reach too far back anyway. He's kind of shot putting it out there. But another guy similar to Wentz, like very tough, very durable. If you're seeing him not practice and dealing with some injuries, there's usually something more behind that. So if he doesn't play, this will definitely get below 3. I think that's the big concern on whether or not this ultimately makes the top 5. The other two that you have, maybe a little more compelling without a QB injury.
You know what? I think I think the Jets are worth considering. I mean, I know it's a crappy line. We should be getting 10.5 in that millions, but I think that people are going to sit there and say Denver's, getting home from the long trip, and they're fat and sassy, and they're going to, they don't need to, put their leg on the neck of the Jets, and the Jets are, had their backs against the wall, so so to speak. There's more to that club than people realize. You're a Jets fan, you know that. What do you think about that?
Well, the problem is they don't have an offensive line, and it didn't work against the Patriots. I don't know if there's enough people out there that are going to look at this and say that, first of all, the Broncos are a worse defense than the Patriots. I think everybody has the Broncos defense very highly regarded. And I think people are going to look at this as basically a repeat of week 2 because Becton's still out on the Jets offensive line. And the middle trio of guys on that O-line right now is a mess, and pressure in the face of any QB, let alone a rookie, is awfully tough. So I wanted to use DeVito on Arizona, but I might use DeVito on the Jets +10 as a consensus. I think too many people saw what happened last week, and they're just expecting the same again this week against a better defense in many regards. What's the third?
I'm throwing it out there for discussion.
All right. We're problem solving on air here. This is a tricky spot for folks.
That's the name of the game. I think it makes it more interesting.
We're working through it.
This one's solid, I think. Packers plus 3.5.
I agree on that one for sure.
Yeah.
Because we've already seen that drop to 3 as we're on air. Some people have been hitting it. We've heard the Don Best alerts in your background, but I think it was for something else aside from that. But there was more money coming in on the Packers, so 3.5. People are going to see that versus the 3. I think that makes a lot of sense. What's your take on the game overall?
That's the type of game that you
tough,
do
right?
That's the game that you do take the hook on, and I definitely am not playing the Packers at this point. So they're a stay away from team. They just have too many problems. They couldn't even win the first half against Detroit. Give me a break. So, I know that you carry Goff in high regard, but still, they should have been able to win that first half. But I think San Francisco. I'd lean San Francisco in that game.
Let me read some of these names off to you from the 49ers depth chart and injury report. Running back Elijah Mitchell, questionable. JaMychal Hasty, out. Trey Sermon, questionable. Moving on to the other side of the football. Eric Armstead, questionable. Javon Kinlaw, questionable. Emmanuel Mosley, questionable. They're already down a couple of corners and guys in the secondary, and this injury report is a couple of pages long if you're really getting into the depth of it. It's a lengthy one, and it's not unusual for the 49ers. We've seen them destroy the Packers in San Francisco the last 2 years, but boy, they sure are getting light and missing a lot of pieces. And so, yeah, here we go from the covers.com injury report. Look at the Packers on the left, and 2 of those guys are not even rostered players, and we're still scrolling on the right for the 49ers. So like that's turning into a bit of a mess of a situation, especially in the running game where it matters most for that offense and how they're constructed. So I agree with you that Packers 3.5 definitely making the top 5. So we're at Raiders -4, Packers +3.5. I have to. I don't know if there's show credit here, but Cardinals have to be in there.
Well,
they're too popular not to be.
What do you think about Washington?
I think the number was a little bit big when we were up at 9.5. I think now it's somewhat fairly priced because we're looking at the contest was 7.5, and so we're looking at a price that I think is quite fair. That defense is incredibly overrated for Washington, and they benefited from a very easy schedule of opponents and quarterbacks last year, which I think heightened the perception of what this defense is. But we've seen teams attack the secondary, like both weeks this season, attack it, which last year was like unthinkable, but they didn't play any quarterbacks that could do it. And so you think of what Buffalo is: 3 wide receiver sets, 4 wide receiver sets, 68% pass rate. Like they saw how to attack this team. The Giants did it on Thursday Night Football. Now you're putting the Bills in there. I think the number's right. I don't think there's going to be a huge divide. You think people are going to go Washington with the hook?
I think it's a possibility. I mean, Allen has been, Allen's been the Allen of 2019 more than the Allen of 2020. He didn't even complete 50% of his passes last week. He's 178 yards, I think. I didn't watch the game, but I'm told, some of his pass play selections were, less than stellar. Their offense is kind of sputtering a little bit. So I think Heineke, is at least as good as they expected from Fitzgerald. I don't think there's any downgrade. He's mobile. They might be able to do some things with him. So the Redskins defense is still, quote, perceived, to be stronger than it is by, much of the market. So I just think it's quite possible that people are going to be considering the Redskins for a contest pick with that, with that hook.
Are we allowed to call them anything but the football team at this point? I don't know. I don't know the rules and regulations around that, but I certainly make my fair share of. And where did the Chargers go? I still call them.
I'm still calling them San Diego.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a habit that'll never go away. So, okay, so we have like a number of fringe ones. Is there another one that stands out to you as one that maybe we're overthinking or just like is too obvious? Like we haven't talked about Baltimore yet. And people are watching the Lions. Again, they got out to a good start on Monday Night Football against a very, very bad Packers defense that really needs to be exploited at some point from a betting angle as we go forward in the future, not potentially this week with all the 49ers injuries. But we saw, again, for the second week, the Lions facing a pretty significant deficit at some point in the game. We're behind 47. They're 41-17 in week 1 against the 49ers. And then against the Packers, they were behind multiple touchdowns, although it didn't come till later. That's just a terrible football team. And now they have to go Tyrell Williams out indefinitely, put on IR with the concussion issues. Has to be a pretty serious concussion. So wide receiver number 1 is out. That leaves Cephas basically is the only sort of offensive weapon outside of their tight end. They get the Ravens off a big victory against Kansas City where one person picked them in the survivor pool, but I think that sort of gained a little bit of respect, beating what was the best team in football into week 2. Does that not carry over and we see the Ravens as a popular choice against the Lions with people just fading the Lions?
I think the fact that they're playing at home, and I think everybody kind of has it in the back of their head that the Lions have the potential to be one of those backdoor cover nightmares. I think people are going to respect big spreads against the Lions, and they're not going to want to get involved. It's one thing to get blown out the second half, in Green Bay. But it's another thing, at home. And, Baltimore off a big win. And we all know what happens in those spots the next week. The celebration says it all. It's a huge flat spot for Baltimore. So I don't think people are going to be lining up to lay 8. I think they're going to line up to lay 2 and teasers left and right. But I think
that's me.
Yeah, I think it's an entirely different story to lay 8 in the contest pick. What about Tampa Bay? You've got a low spread. You've got the better team. You've got the team that won the Super Bowl. You've got Brady. I think that's going to be an easy selection for, it's going to be a game of interest. The spread's not going to come into play more than likely. And I think there's going to be more people on Tampa than the Rams.
I like the Bucks a lot more than I like Washington or the Jets as the top 5 consensus.
Let's put Tampa Bay in there for third then.
Tampa Bay makes sense, number 3. And like you mentioned, spread's not going to matter. And there's a lot of hype for the Rams, but nobody has these two teams equal. If you ask who's the best team in football, it's either Kansas City or Tampa Bay. The Rams are probably a consensus top 5 to 6 for most people, but nobody's putting these two on an equal field. And so when you consider that home field advantage for the season has been just less than 1.5 points through 2 weeks, you're looking at 1.5 points here, which was bet up. We're basically calling these two teams even from this point spread perspective. If you remove the home field advantage that's being implied into the line, I don't see how people get to that point right now anyway at this point in the season after seeing what Tampa Bay did week 1 and week 2.
What about those Philadelphia Eagles?
I was looking at that game as being a potential Cowboy spot more than an Eagle spot.
Okay.
Off the win against the Chargers, everybody thought they looked a lot better than they did Thursday Night Football. If you dive into the box score, the Cowboys had great output numbers, but remember, 3 turnovers took points off the board for Tampa Bay, put them in Dallas's pocket. It was 31-29. They obviously had the late lead, but boy, I think there's more concerns with them. But people are going to look at that on Thursday Night Football against the Bucs week 1, think that was a much better performance than it was. And then last week, they had the help of the referees for the majority of the third and fourth quarter, bailing them out against the Chargers, and then that Herbert pick in the end zone. So I think people still like the Cowboys a little bit more. But from a betting perspective, I actually don't think the Eagles are that bad of a pick for Monday Night Football, but not for a contest.
Where do you see the pulse with Falcons and Giants?
Pretty split down the middle, I think. Falcons are an 0-2 team. Historically in the NFL, 0-2 teams against the spread in week 1 and 2 cash at about a 62% rate in week 3 because there's just that natural inflation. But the issue here was the Falcons get the Giants off of Thursday Night Football, who I think many people view as impressing against that Washington defense. Finally saw the offense come together, but Barkley's a week healthier. Evan Ingram is back on the field. He's projected to start. Even though Jason Garrett and Kenny Golladay allegedly fought in practice or almost came to blows. So that would be like the third fight at a Giants practice in 4 weeks, dating back to the preseason. I think people kind of seeing the Giants here in this spot, or rather seeing what the Falcons haven't done, and probably pretty evenly split.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking also. And the Seahawks Vikings is also interesting. It's another one of those low spread, just win the game type in people's minds.
So that's the spot, right? If we're looking for another one of those spread, doesn't matter. You're looking for people. It's going to be a popular game. I think it's fair to say that with both of these teams involved, there's pretty divisive opinions. You think Seattle at 2.5 is another one?
Well, they're 1.5 in the pool. And I know Seattle's getting a lot of sharp action, but the average person, I'm not so sure, wants to back Seattle. Coming back to Minnesota's coming back home. They really should have won the first 2 games. It's a desperate situation for Zimmer, and the Vikings may get more support than you realize on the betting day. From betting day.
Do you know the extent of the issues with Zimmer and that locker room and how on the edge it is?
I not really. I mean, I know it's been. I know there's been some issues, and really everything's going to come to a boil with this game. They're either going to.
This is it.
If he doesn't win this game, then stuff can happen pretty fast. Actually, I think people are losing their patience.
Well, just think about the spot. So, right in the off season, there's this whole vaccine issue that divides the locker room, and then we get into the preseason. They need a pass rusher. Late preseason, they bring in Everson Griffin, who went out of his way to publicly bury Kirk Cousins in public. Shortly after, Mike Zimmer comes out and throws Kirk Cousins directly under the bus. And we're talking like maybe even 2 buses with the 8 wheels bumping over him. Absolutely buries his quarterback. And then before week 1, ownership comes out and puts a playoff mandate on Zimmer and staff. Whereas if they don't make the playoffs, then he and the crew is going to be removed from the team, and there's going to be significant changes in the offseason. And you get week 1 in overtime where there's the fumble late that cost them the game. And then week 2 with the missed field goal that would have been the win. So now you look at Zimmer with this locker room that's divided and all sorts of issues between the offense and the defense. Your job is on the line, and these guys keep crumbling late. And the defense, which has always been your strong part, looks horrendous through the first 2 weeks of the season. And so it's like, when does this ultimately boil over? And now they get basically the same type of offensive scheme in Seattle that they couldn't stop to save their life against Arizona. So it's interesting to see how long this can sort of hold on for Minnesota, but it's getting pretty dire in that locker room.
It sure is, but winning solves those problems. So if they can just get a winner,
they just have to win. Dalvin Cook on the injury report as well did not practice Wednesday. We'll know more about that today. Stanley Snipe comes in, might be able to help us here get to a 4th pick. What about the Pats -3? Bill will terrorize Jameis. He certainly terrorized Wilson a week ago. What do you think of that one?
I think I think that line's going to move down, and I think that bad taste of the Saints isn't going to wash out of people's mouths from last week. I think the Patriots are certainly a consideration that I like more than some of the teams we've discussed.
Okay, so let's do this. We're at 3. We've talked through virtually every game, and we're fairly divided on some of them. I'm adamant about Arizona being in this top 5. So what if we take pick 4 and pick 5? I get pick 4, you get pick 5. We'll split the difference. We've come to a consensus on 3. I know you don't like Arizona, but I'll stand by it, and I'll put the week 1 and 2 reputation, which hasn't been strong, on the line here with Cardinals -7.5, and I'll leave the 5th one up for you.
What? Oh, yeah. I don't think that's a good way to do it, but
by all means, propose another game because we're running out of options here, and we're pretty split.
I think that. I think we seem to somewhat agree on the Patriots. They get a push on a 3. It seems like a potential very safe choice for people.
All right, we'll go Patriots -3. I will pencil that one in. And we've got to settle on a 5th. The Jags have looked as bad of a football team as we've seen to start the year in a very long time. They have no offensive line helping. Chandler Jones, 5 sacks against the Titans.
But you don't have to talk me into the merits of that. It's the perception of when you look at a contest card. What are you willing to lay 7.5 when you've got, a Viking Seahawks game available? You can pick one of those sides. We didn't talk about the Chargers Chiefs. I think we can probably agree that's going to be a 50-50 somewhere along there. That hook's going to look. I'm really at a loss on that 5th one. I just don't care for the -7.5. If you want to use your once a year to stick it on there. So potential ridicule.
I'll take all the ridicule, but here's what I'll say. There's a few thousand folks in the contest who look at things very differently than you do and your expertise from playing these contests for a number of years. So I think you see the 7.5 and you're off put by it. But I think there's a whole lot of people in the contest that see the 7.5 and see what the Jags have done in week 1 and 2 and how impressive the Cardinals offense have been. And I think they flock to that and take the 7.5.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably gets more. I mean, we can throw it on there.
This will be the veto, and then we'll put the rule in where if the veto works, the veto stays alive for the season. If it doesn't, it's gone, and then it's just going to have to be salesmanship the rest of the way.
We can make it up as we go along. That works.
That's how we do it every single week.
That's obviously going to be your pick of the week, right?
That's my pick of the week. So that sets you up. You have the 2-0 lead. Where are you going for your top pick?
Oh, I can throw a dart and beat it, but I'm kidding though. That's a good question.
We've got Las Vegas, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, New England as the other 4 in the top 5 to go along with Arizona.
Let's go with the. I'm gonna go with the Steelers anyway.
You're going against it. Okay.
I'm going with the Steelers.
You're going against the top 5. I did that in week 1, to be fair, and I lost by about 22 total picks. I didn't want to use the veto on that in week 1. It's too early in the season, so I used it. So you're going Steelers -3. It's
just gonna, chap your buns if Pittsburgh beats out Arizona this week. So
it really will.
I get that little extra needle values.
I've got the alarm set for 3 p.m. Pacific time so I can refresh the Circa Twitter feed to see what the consensus numbers were. He's with LVC on this, and so is the market. For which game? Because the market's going against the Steelers. Is he saying the Bucks -1.5? Producer Brady will hook us up. So it is the Bucks -1.5. So, yep, that makes a lot of sense. We'll be the top. That's interesting. It could be that big of a divide. It's one of those where the contest is on to a number before it happens. That's certainly. I don't know if it'll be top, but I think it'll be up there for sure. Just because you said the point spread doesn't matter, and I don't know who's looking at the Rams as better than the Bucks at this point. That leaves us with one order of business to wrap up. Again, the top 5: Las Vegas, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, New England, and Arizona. A lot of 2-letter abbreviations with Arizona at the end. The top pick in the Survivor for week 3. LVC, what's it going to be?
You know what? I'm going to have to go to the back of the class. I was so distraught with my own failures that I didn't examine it, quite frankly.
First of all, okay, so we'll set it up this way. Carolina, a very obvious one. Are they going to be this big of a favorite the rest of the season?
Carolina is a perfect choice because you're not going to get a better choice. I mentioned that at the beginning of the show. Carolina is a pretty fine pick.
Is there going to be another spot where the Broncos are 11-point favorites as well at home?
No.
So that kind of follows the same criteria, which is where I'm going to go in expecting the Broncos to be most picked, just because that number is so big. And you're getting that 0-2 Jets team against while they got the late cover, depending how you grade it in week 1, but a team that for the majority of the market is 0-2 against the spread. You see that bigger inflated number at Denver in a very similar situation against an opposing defense like the Pats last week. I think that number is probably going to be the peak of what we see for the Broncos this season. So I guess the question becomes is from getting the pick in perspective, are more people going to get the Panthers in versus those that take an extra day or two to study and then ultimately settle on the Broncos? That's sort of to be seen, I guess.
Well, the Broncos do have the Lions and the Bengals coming in later on.
Is that going to be bigger than the Jets? Bengals certainly not. But will the Lions be? That's a tough question to answer now, I guess.
And this is the only time. Well, here's the story. This is the only time you're going to use Carolina.
That's exactly it. But it's will most people use it on a Thursday night or versus the weekend is the question, right?
Well, in Survivor, I don't think that the day of the week matters in the least. As long as that game's being played, you actually have a better advantage because you can put your pick in the day of the game. So Thursdays are great for Survivor.
I'm completely on board with you and agree. I'd say for conversation's sake, we'll see how that divides. It's an interesting thing to look at last week, but I'm with you that Carolina is going to be a very popular pick. No Carson Wentz in practice. There you go.
And again, I'm not trying to, what I really was looking at a perspective of what I think are the smart plays. I'm not sure whether those are going to be the top 2 plays, quite frankly, different than we're doing on the millions.
Well, I think they're going to be right at the top for sure. So we're doing
double duty.
We're doing the double duty here for sure with those two. So again, top 5 consensus for us, and we need a couple of wins here. Las Vegas, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, New England, Arizona, and then we're going with the projected top 2, Carolina, most likely the number 1, and then the Broncos on Sunday. Another comment in, I won Circa Survivor last year. Very nice. I guess 20% go Panthers, 35% Broncos. We'll see, right? It's interesting because you get the extra days. I think if the Panthers were on Sunday, I think without a question, it's the overwhelming top pick because people would see that that's the only time they're using it. Because it's Thursday, it'll be interesting. We'll see next week here on the Covers account, Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, if the Thursday night, Sunday night difference matters.
It sounds good.
All righty. Let's try double the win total. How about that? We're at 2. Let's get to 4 by the end of NFL Week 3. But for LVC and myself and Covers.com, that'll do it for Week 3 of the Football Contest Countdown Show. We'll see you back here next Thursday at 10 a.m. Thanks very much for joining us, LVC. Enjoy the week.